Okay, so in today's class, we're going to look at how, can you get the door there? Maybe the lights even. How you would upload a website to the web. So in SOF 6007, you would have made a web page, a website with HTML, CSS, maybe some JavaScript. And that was sitting on your laptop or your desktop. And it's probably still sitting there. No one has seen it. To put something onto the big bad interweb, you have to put it on a special machine called a web server. And that's a computer. Increasingly it's more than one, but mentally we visualize it as a single computer that sits there all day taking requests for pages and files and serving them up to people. So a request comes in for page2.html and it goes, there you go, there's page 2, thank you very much. Request comes in for, GIF, photo7.gif, it gives that out, or partypicture2.jpg, something like that. Maybe a request comes in for partypicture22.jpg and there's no such thing and it gives back an error or something. But for the most part, web servers sit there all day taking requests and giving out the files. You could, if you want to do things commando style, set up a web server at home, or that man there could be setting up a web server on his Mac as we speak. It's an easy enough thing to do, but for just in terms of scale, it might not be a good idea. So certainly the stuff I have on the web, I could probably put on my machine here because I have so little traffic, it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to be getting a lot of traffic, or generally speaking, even if you're a business, you don't want to be fiddling with web servers and stuff at home. That's grand for guys like you, but civilians wouldn't be doing that. The muggles would have no hope of sorting that out and getting it right. So what most people do is you pay a hosting company some money and they'll host your website for you. And they might give you promises like 99.9% uptime and various things. A lot of it reads like a plan for a mobile phone package. They make all sorts of different prices and you can have big and small and whatnot. I think the cheapest I've seen lately was like $4 a month, which is pretty good going. That was like an introductory offer. Later they jack up the price to $6 a month or something. So that's the kind of money for bottom of the range. Obviously, if you're running Amazon, you're spending millions and millions and millions on your infrastructure. You're not doing it for $4 a month. So it'll vary with the scale. But certainly if you wanted to set up a website, say put your CV up there, you figured your blog wasn't enough, you wanted to put up your CV, examples of your work, or if you have a band and you want to create a website for them, you could probably do it for $4 a month in terms of hosting. So some things you have to consider though when you put files on a web server. Many web servers use case-sensitive file names. So on your Windows machine or on your Mac, Dan's page.html with uppercase letters and Dan's page.html with lowercase letters is pretty much the same. So on your desktop machine, you can kind of do what you like and get away with it. But when you upload pages to a web server, you might find you run into difficulty. Another thing that causes problems are spaces and punctuation. So Dan's page with an apostrophe and a space would probably work okay on your desktop machine, but it would not have fun on a web server. It would not go down very well. The main reason is that, as we'll see in a second, many web servers actually are built on Unix, and that operating system uses case-sensitive file names. Similarly, there's the issue of whether you go with .html or .htm. It doesn't really matter. Windows machines traditionally couldn't do 4-character extensions. So we ended up with .htm for some Windows machines. What you don't want to do with any of this is you don't want to be mixing and matching. So what the cool people do, the cool people use lowercase file names and stick with them, and .html. What you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be making your web page and having a link and saying, right now, was that .html or .htm? I know some were HTML and some were HTM, and I know I did uppercase for some, but others I didn't. Screw that, like, life's too short. Go with something and stick with it. And, you know, you're in the nerd club now, you know, the cool people, lowercase .html, that's what you do. Okay, the BIS people can do .htm. Now, you weren't exposed to them last semester. You may at some stage in your careers come across them. But there are authoring tools that you would use to generate HTML. So if you're creating a large site, it could be a lot of work to go coding the HTML, you know, line by line, page by page. You can get tools that give you, you know, like a graphical interface. You can say, well, I want to put a picture there. I want this text here. I want to select that text and put it in bold. At the most basic level, you can say to Microsoft Word, you know, save this as a website. And it'll go away and do that. Apple had a product called iWeb, which was very cute, very slick. They got bored with it. Dreamweaver is the main thing that web designers use to make their sites. And one of the cool things about Dreamweaver is that you have access to the raw HTML and CSS and the graphical version. So you can move things, you can select something and, you know, make it bold. Or you could just go into the HTML and make it bold. You get to switch between the CSS and the HTML and the visual version. Many of those tools can connect up to and talk directly to your web server. So when you sign up for your web hosting plan, you get a username and a password from the company. You could put that into Dreamweaver, and then when you are ready, when you've finished tweaking your site, you could say to Dreamweaver, I want you to publish that for me. And it'll go off and negotiate with the web server for you. Alternatively, these tools can save something, save your website to a folder somewhere. And then you'd be in the situation like you're in now, where you have a website sitting on your hard disk, and you need to make a copy of it on the web. So you have it figured out on your hard disk or your laptop what it is you want to do. You want to duplicate that now on the web so everyone can see it. And so what we're going to look at today are the different ways you can upload your website. And I've just realized that this is the lab class, but anyway, I'll keep going. Okay, so there are 3 different ways really you can do that. So most hosting companies would use a kind of a web type interface. There are also programs you can get which sit between you and the web server, and it gives you the impression, you know, you can sort of drag and drop and it'll do all the negotiating. And then also there's the hard way, the old-fashioned way, which is using File Transfer Protocol, or FTP. And so you're going to do that in the lab. If we look here, this is a screenshot from the web interface of a hosting service. So this was HostCentric was the name of this one. So you see you get a bunch of folders and stuff, and you can copy files into the folders. It's a bit like, you know, the web interface to Dropbox. Do you know the way you can create folders and put things in, but you can't quite drag and drop, and it's a bit clunky. It's very like the web interface for Dropbox. You can also probably, in most cases now, mount your web hosting service as a drive, like you can with Dropbox, and just drag and drop things in. That's probably possible as well, depending on how it's set up. But we're going to look at the how it's done old school, because to be full members of the Geek Club, really, you have to have done this at least once, if only to talk about how awful it was. Unix is an operating system that was developed in Berkeley in the 1960s, along with other inventions, and it is probably the main operating system of the web. So most of the web servers in the world are running an open source version of Unix, and on top of that then they're running an open source web server called Apache. So you might hear people talking about an Apache server. It's not someone who works in the pizza place down there. Okay. Most of the routers as well would be running Unix. So Unix is basically the operating system of the internet, of the web. Unix is a command line. Well, there are other things running Unix as well. I mean, my Mac is built on top of Unix. Android is built on top of Unix. So you can put a graphical interface on top of all this. But at its core, there's this operating system called Unix. And we're going to look at the commands you use to work that. I'm not going to tell you all about Unix. I'm just going to tell you about the Unix commands you need to do FTP. So you can do lots of things in Unix, but we're only looking at FTP. By the way, FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol, but we usually use it as a verb. It'd be interesting to see if we were to look it up in a dictionary, if it has become a verb. But you could say, like someone calls you, you come in for coffee. No, I must just FTP these files, and then I'll come. So you FTP something, even though File Transfer Protocol is a noun. You know, you say, I was FTPing that and my machine hung, or I'm FTPing that and it's taken ages. So it's a verb in geek speak. Now, so to list the contents of a directory, I find myself using the word folder all the time. In Unix, we call them directories. I think directory and folder comes out my mouth. Okay, so I'm using the terms interchangeably. But that's the idea. So it's a folder. You have a hierarchical directory structure, and you've folders inside folders. There I did it again. Directories inside directories inside directories. Okay. To list the contents of a directory, you say ls. So you're actually in there. You know, you have a little prompt, and you have to go ls, hit return, and you see what's there. I can maybe show you that in a second on this machine, because like I said, this is in fact a Unix machine. Move will move a file from one place to another. So you could specify, I have a file here, I want to move it over there. So I guess it makes a copy and then deletes the old one. You won't use that very much. CP copies a file. So you could say cp file1.html, file2.html, and then you'll have a copy. rm is remove, it deletes a file. So you'd say rm file1 will delete file1. You notice all these commands are in lowercase. You can use wildcards in Unix, and this is perhaps the only good reason to actually do an FTP manually. If you have a site with 200 pages, if you were to go, okay, click upload file, then go find file, click open, okay, now click add file, then click file, thingy, 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 thingy. You know, using a web interface, you could be there a while. Whereas if you're in an FTP session, you might be able to specify the 100 files that you want using wildcards and whatnot. So sometimes it might actually be quicker and easier to do things this way. But those times would be rare enough, to be honest. It is quite a chore. We've become used to, you know, not even using mice anymore, just sort of dragging and dropping with our fingers. No. So rm-dan_star.html would delete dan1.html, danny2.html, danielle.html. Delete all those files in one go. Because anything that starts with Dan, that star then is whatever. So this says remove dan whatever.html. So that can be quite quick at times. So Unix has a hierarchical directory structure. So you've got like directories inside directories inside directories, like you have on your own machine. You have the root, you know, you might have your C drive or whatever, a bunch of folders there. You might have My Photos is one of the folders inside that. You might have them broken down by year or whatever. It's the same. And the different commands then you can use to navigate through that structure. So mkdir is make a new directory. So mkdir my site would make a new folder called my site, and rmdir deletes the directory. Sometimes it throws a tizzy fit and insists that you delete everything in the directory first before you delete the directory. But if that's troublesome, there are ways around that. I mean, there are lots of bells and whistles options on these commands. So cd is what you use to move around, to change directories. So if you're in a directory and my site is one of the subdirectories there, you can say cd my site to go down into that one. Now, have you come across paths in any other course? Do you know the way you have like your slashes and your whatnots? I'll show you in a second. But if you really want to be comfortable in Unix, you have to get to grips with paths. So you don't always have to go to the directory you're talking about. You can just do stuff down there, you know, from here. You see, in Unix, it's not like you have on your desktop machine where you've 10 folders open and you can just hop from one to the other. If you want to copy something from here to here, you just drag and drop. You're in a particular folder, you're in a particular directory at a particular time. And what you can see will depend on where you are. So suppose I was in a directory called Europe and I could see Ireland, France, Spain, and Germany. I could go to the Ballincollig directory by saying, sorry, I could see what's in the Ballincollig directory, not go to it now, ls will just list the contents of it. I could see what's in the Ballincollig directory by going ls Ireland/Cork/Ballincollig. And I could see all the things in the Ballincollig directory without going there. If I did cd Ireland/Cork/Ballincollig, I could then do ls and see all the things in Ballincollig. But I'd be in the Ballincollig folder then at that stage. And cd ... moves you up a level. So let's suppose I was in the Pablo Honey folder and I wanted to move to the Zuropa folder. You can see my iPod is stuck in a time warp. No. So you could go cd ... /u2/Zuropa, and that would go straight from Pablo Honey, where you are, to Zuropa. Because you do cd ... will bring you up a level, ... will bring you up another level, so now you're in music, and then u2 would bring you down a level, and Zuropa would bring you down another level, down into Zuropa. So you can do some funky stuff with the paths, but it can be a bit of a head wreck, and it can get tricky. But people who do this stuff a lot save themselves lots of time because they're very nifty with the paths. pwd tells you what directory you're in. I find when I'm doing stuff in Unix, I'm doing pwd a lot because I can't see where I am, so I get paranoid about, okay, where am I now? Okay, I'm in that folder. So pwd tells you where you are. ls tells you a list of the things that are where you are. So the things then you need to do for an FTP session. How am I doing for time? Grant. So there are a bunch of commands you'd use then when you're doing an FTP session. So you can just say FTP if you want, and then you've started off an FTP session. And then you can say open myserver.com. If you just say FTP myserver.com, then it'll assume you want to open it. So you can go into FTP, you say open myserver.com, or you can say FTP myserver.com. If you had a bunch of servers open, you'd be dealing with the difference between those things. There was a time when it was very common to allow people to anonymously upload and download things, but that doesn't happen so much now. It was the main way to distribute things before the web. So you're very likely going to be prompted for a username and password. So in the labs, I'll give you the username and password of the machine you're going to use. You're all going to have the same account, so you need to be careful because you could overwrite someone else's stuff. But it'd just be easier than me giving you all accounts. Now, so this is the tricky part now. So I have on my machine a website, and I want to upload it to the server over there. What I need to do is I need to navigate on this machine to the folder where the web pages are, and then navigate on the remote machine to the directory where they're going to go, and then do a kind of a copy, put them up there. So when you're in an FTP session, CD doesn't navigate on the local machine, it navigates on the remote machine. And LCD navigates on the local machine. LS lists the contents on the remote machine. And until yesterday, I thought LLS listed the contents on the local machine, but it's actually exclamation mark LS. I guess I saw exclamation mark and just thought it was a typo, that it, that there was some kind of consistency there, but no. So, and then LPW will tell you where you are on the local machine. So you're navigating around folders remotely and locally. So CD moves remotely, LCD moves locally. They're the main two. So you set it up so that now you're in the folder on your local machine where the pages are. You're in the folder on the remote machine where they're going to go, and then you do a put, it's called. There are two modes for FTP, for file transfers. One is ASCII and one is binary. You use ASCII for your HTML and for your CSS, the text files, and then you use binary for your JPEGs and your GIFs and maybe your Flash movies and things like that. So GET takes files from the remote server and puts them on the local one. So you can say get my page 1 will copy that page from the current directory of the remote server to the current directory of the local machine. If you specify a file name, you can change the name of it in transit. Although why you would do that, I don't know, it could be a bit of a head wreck. It would be tricky doing things like that. I would never be so brave myself. mget allows you to get several copies at once. So you could say mget star and you get everything from the remote folder copied into your local folder. Sometimes it prompts you, do you want to do this? You say yes. Do you want this file? Yes. Do you want this file? Yes. Now put is the most important one. So put copies a file from the local directory to the remote directory. So if you say put page1.html, it'll take page 1 from your local machine and copy that to the folder on the server. And so that's what you use then to upload your pages to the web server. So mput then copies multiple files. So you might say mput star.html if you wanted to copy all the HTML files. Something like that. Any questions? So what I'll do now is a minute I'll give you the details of the name of the machine and stuff. Or maybe I can even try that right now. We'll see. We'll see. No, I can't do FTP across the Wi-Fi. The security won't let it, so I can't. Any questions?